Hi everybody, I'm Tabitha and I've read 5 more books. If you have never watched one of these videos before and you're looking for my rating scale, you can now find that at the end of the video. In fact, in the description, I'll have a link that tells you exactly what time to watch that for if that's what you're looking for. I will also have timestamps that help you jump to each book that I'm about to review because I am going to give you spoiler-free reviews for all 5 books that I read. Are you ready? Let's go! The next book that I read in the month of June was Daughter of the Marmaros by Shayna Grissom. This is an adult age category fantasy novel. It is coming to you in July of 2020. It is independently published and it is 162 pages. Your synopsis. In the tallest tower of the Marmaros, Bernadette finds herself with cold feet. As the youngest female of her rather rigid and strict race, she's expected to provide offspring. She isn't exactly looking forward to the prospect of mating with the council member they've chosen for her. When Bernadette instead pursues a stranger into the woods, she'll find secrets she was never meant to find. So what didn't I like about this one? The first thing I can say is there are a few instances of telling versus showing. I'll say this did add to the mystery of this particular story, but it took me a while to realize that was the purpose of the telling instead of showing. So it might bother you in the beginning, but it has a purpose, so hang in there. The second thing I can say I noticed, there were some small errors in grammar and punctuation. They're minor, they don't really affect the readability, and they didn't keep me from enjoying the story. The third thing I can say might be something you don't like is that there are unanswered questions in this one. They're not big ones, they're just small ones. They're things that were brought up by the plot twists that you'll find yourself curious about. But in my opinion, this is a good thing because it can lend to unpacking and discussing the book with other people who read it. In fact, this one might really be a good one for book clubs to pick up. So what did I like about this book? The first thing is this book reads like a legend, which is so cool. I love that style. I feel like it really worked for this story. The entire book made me feel like I was reading like an old folklore. I think the lesson worked for that. The message worked for that. I really, really loved that. I loved that vibe and that feeling, which was awesome. Second thing I liked about this one is there's a mystery element. I wasn't exactly expecting mystery. Like reading the description, I wasn't really expecting mystery, so I was pleasantly surprised to find that the mystery lover in me, which you all know is a pretty big one, big section of myself, I just dug this story. I really got into that. I got into trying to unravel it and figure out what was going on and solve the mystery. Third thing I can say I loved about this one is there were some seriously lovable characters. I do love Bernadette. She's incredibly strong. She has great ambition. And I liked that about her. But my favorite character was actually probably little Adam. This is a character who fiercely loves, and I feel like he was just one of my new favorites. I wanted to hug that child through this whole book. So who do I think should read this one? If you're fans of legend or folklore and you're open to the idea of a fresh new story with that same vibe, you are going to love this book. I also think fantasy fans who like big worlds they can get immersed in will like this one. And don't forget, I also think this would be good for book clubs. My rating? I gave this one 4 stars. It's a solid fantasy story, and I think fantasy fans are going to love it. So 4 stars for Daughter of the Marmaros by Shayna Grissom. The next book I read in the month of June was You're Next by Kylie, Schachte. This is a 2020 release by Jimmy Patterson Books. In fact, I think this was an advanced reader copy that comes out in July. It is a young adult age category mystery thriller, and it is 480 pages long. Your synopsis. Flora Calhoun has a history of putting her amateur detective nose into things that may get her in trouble. In fact, you could say she has a history of finding dead bodies. When she investigates the murder of an ex, she may be putting herself and everyone she loves on the list of who's next. So what didn't I like about this one? Oh my goodness. This one is plagued by the problem of reading it and going, is this a sequel? And then no, you go check and it's a debut for this author and it's the first for this character, but it feels like a sequel. There's a lot of references in this book to the last time. In fact, there's too many of them, in my opinion. I get that it's trying to build hype and mystery for the story. I get that we're trying to sprinkle in little facts as we go, but it didn't work. It left me feeling like this was a sequel and I didn't read the first one. The next thing I can say I didn't like is that at first, the voice is awkward. It took me 2 or 3 chapters before I was okay with Flora's voice. The sentences are choppy and immature. It almost feels to me like Flora is trying to convince us that she's smart and focused. It gave me this I'm a big girl kind of vibe, which made it feel more middle grade than would have been appropriate for the story. Third thing I can say I didn't like is the detail. I'm not normally a stickler for detail, but sometimes when you throw out details that are incorrect or confusing, they absolutely pull me right out of the story. I should say that these are not things that are in any way important to the story at all. They're little things. They just, when they pull you out of a story, it's annoying. I'm going to give you one example. Happens towards the end of the book. There's a character making mac and cheese. The character notices, they mentioned the brand too, the character notices that distinctly orange color we would all recognize. If you've ever made a box, that blue box of mac and cheese, you know that once you get that orange color, it's done. In this story, the character is continuing to make it, standing over the stove, stirring it, watching it cook, even has to have another character take over for them to finish making it. That's a detail that pulled me out of the story because I wanted to smack them both and tell them it's done and they should be eating it. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. The last thing I can say I didn't particularly like about this one is the ending. I don't want to ruin anything because I pride myself on spoiler-free reviews around here, but let's just say this ending, in my opinion, was not okay. It was too convenient, too easy, and too incredibly unfair to the readers and one particular character. That's all I can say. So what did I like about this one? Valentine. He is a solid character. He has a backstory that makes sense. He improves Flora by giving her more personality every time he is in a scene with her. I feel like Valentine saved this book and this character for me. He is a great, great character. Second thing I liked about this one is the mystery is satisfying. The clues are dropped in a way that you can piece them together. You can follow along with the detective or amateur detective. That's always fun to try to do and follow those clues. This mystery worked. The third thing I can say I liked about this one is I can't knock the pace. The pace works. For a book that is really long, this one is pushing 500 pages, it actually moves very quickly. The shorter chapters and cliffhangers keep this one moving. They keep your interest. Really, the pacing is just remarkably well done. Who do I think should read this one? If you're a reader who likes a solid mystery and you don't exactly mind if things aren't perfectly realistic, you're okay with suspending disbelief a little bit, I think you're going to like this one and it'll take you on a scary and thrilling ride. My rating? I had to give this one 3 stars. It needed a little tightening in my opinion, but it's still a decent mystery and a solid debut. So 3 stars for You're Next by Kylie, Schachte. The next book I read in the month of June is Before I Fall by Lauren Oliver. This is a 2010 publication by HarperCollins. It is a young adult age category fantasy novel, although I would also call it contemporary, and it is 470 pages. Your synopsis. For popular high school senior Samantha Kingston, February 12th is all about collecting roses to show off her popularity. That is, until she dies. But then, she wakes up again. In fact, Samantha is about to live her final day over and over and over again. Can she find slight changes and alter her future? So what didn't I like about this one? Samantha. Samantha, right from the start. I do not DNF books. If you watch this channel, you know that. I will stick with the book all the way to the end. But this book was close. The first 2 chapters of this book, Samantha is rough. I hated her. She is a classic mean girl. I mean, I stopped reading and wrote a note to myself that I wrote, this girl's going to need to grow up. She gets tough to read all the way through. She does make changes. She does get better, but she is still tough to read all the way through. And I will say that there's stuff coming that I'll talk about that makes me glad I read it, but those first couple chapters are rough. Whew. Second thing I can say I didn't like about this one, and this one continues all the way through, is these are some terrible teenagers. They could have probably redeemed the book. I'm kind of on the fence about Kurt at this point, but some of them could have redeemed the book, but most of them are nasty, insufferable, and they're constantly drunk. I didn't like any of them, and to be honest, I feel like this would have been more believable if it was about college students. I feel like I knew more kids in college who were that kind of kid than I did in high school. So I don't know. I feel like maybe it would have been a little more believable if they were a bit older. But that's just me. Third thing I can say I didn't like about this one is that the premise has been done. Groundhog Day, which is actually mentioned in the book, is one of the ones that I would say I've seen this storyline in that before. Basically, there's a terrible person who's supposed to learn an important lesson after being forced to relive a day over and over again. There's nothing new that I can say is thrown into this one, unless you consider the fact that they're teenagers being a twist on that story. So what did I like? Well, the first thing I can say I liked is that it is emotional. The author does a good job of making you feel things, massive amounts of things throughout this entire book. And I do think that was intentional. Even some of the stuff that comes up because the characters are bad people, you might feel things that are nostalgic and that are good, even though some of them are kind of hurtful. So I think there are a lot of emotional things wrapped up in this one, which was the point of the story. Second thing I can say I liked about this one is I did like the ending. This is the kind of ending that I like. It's the kind that gives me a lot of answers, but still lets me think. Honestly, I'm going to be processing that ending for quite a while. I think the last little twist that you get at the ending was a stroke of genius. It made this story next level. I can't tell you about it because huge spoilers, but I can tell you that there are people on Goodreads and other social media who do not like this ending. So here's my call to those people. Yes, at first it feels like a gut punch and a cop-out bad ending, but if you look at it a little deeper or think about it longer, it's pretty amazing. It was the way this author was trying to make this story different than the ones like it that have been told before, and I kind of dig that. Third thing I can say I liked about this book is there are good morality lessons buried in here. Granted, you're going to have to dig through a lot of terrible teenagers behaving badly to try to find them, but if you can find them, they're big lessons, and they are important, and I do think they will speak to you. Who do I think should read this one? If you're a fan of an emotional book that will confront the worst part of people in the name of giving us good lessons overall, I think that you'll like this one. My rating? I had to give this one 3 stars. I struggled with that, actually, because the beginning was so rough and the characters were so annoying, but the ending was great and the lessons were good. So I landed on 3 stars because you have to be the kind of reader who's looking for this book and is willing to stick with it if the beginning is rough. So 3 stars, Before I Fall by Lauren Oliver. This next book was the book on my TBR with the highest reader average on Goodreads. The next book I read in the month of June was The Darkling by KL Hagaman. This is an adult age category fantasy novel. It was independently published in 2019 and it is 238 pages. This was also the highest rated book on my TBR before the month started. Your synopsis. With her memories restored, Princess Lila and her keeper, Caden, continue on their quest to return balance to the fallen kingdom. But secrets from his past will be speed bumps for Caden. So what didn't I like about this one? The first thing I can say is there were some formatting issues, but that may be because I got this one as an ebook that I bought directly from Amazon. The paragraphs were starting in weird spots, often making it seem like I was at the end of a sentence when I wasn't. There were even a few times where I thought I was at the end of a chapter, but when I turned the page, the chapter and the paragraph were continuing. There was white space at the bottom of some pages. It was really just confusing. It has absolutely nothing to do with the content of the book, but it does affect the reading experience, so it is worth mentioning. The second thing I could say I didn't like about this one is that it was a little slow in parts. Most of those tended to be at the beginning of the book. It seemed to suffer from a lot of major plot points or events at the beginning, which I think is what caused it to be a little slower. It definitely read slower than the first book in the series. Third thing I can say I didn't like about this one is it had some word choice issues. There were some times when I wanted new phrases because I noticed repetitive phrases. It was just underwhelming almost sometimes in the way some of the things were described. It got the job done. The words worked. They weren't the wrong words. I just wanted a little finesse, if that makes sense. So what did I like about this one? Caden. Caden was my favorite character in the first book, and I think I even remember saying on my first review that I liked Caden so much that I wanted him to have a bigger role. Yay! Caden gets a bigger role in this one. He's honestly probably the main character of this one. He drives the book. He's probably likely going to drive me right into the third one. He's an honest, dependable, deep character, and I just really, really like him. Second thing I can say I liked about this one is it had a very fast second half. It kicks up the intensity and the stakes for the characters at about the halfway point. In fact, the final 10% of this book is a do not miss. Like, don't. If you're considering DNFing this book in the beginning, please don't. That last 10% hits hard. It's amazing. It's setting up what I assume is going to be a third book beautifully. It wraps up this one perfectly, but I'm still interested enough to find that third one. The last thing I can say I liked about this one is it gives you the answers you craved from the first book. That's always a plus in a sequel. So in that manner, I think this was a sequel done right. I had questions in the first one, but they weren't major. I needed them answered right now. They're just lingering. I'm still wondering. And most of them were answered in this one, which is great. It just solidly followed up that first book. Who do I think should read this one? I mean, obviously, if you're a fan of the first one, you should probably go read this one because it was really good. But also, if you are a fan of magical systems, I think you're going to like this one. The magic system in this series is written really well, but the backstory and the setup and the restrictions to magic are really laid out in this one, which is great. I love seeing detailed magic systems. My rating, I gave this one 3 stars. I think if you're a fantasy fan, you'll enjoy this, but you have to enjoy magic systems specifically. So if you're in that niche, I think you're going to love this one. So 3 stars for The Darkling by KL Hagaman. This next book had the lowest reader average on Goodreads before this month started. The next book I read in the month of June, which is the 10th for June and the 5th for this video, is A Soft Place to Land by Susan Rebecca White. This is a 2010 publication by Atria Books. It is an adult age category contemporary novel, and it is 352 pages. This was actually the lowest rated book on my TBR before the month started. Your synopsis. For more than 10 years, Naomi and Phil enjoyed a perfect life together with their 2 children. But when the couple dies in a tragic accident, their daughters learn the shocking twist put into the will. The girls will be separated. As the girls grow up and their lives take them in different directions, it seems like the echoes of their parents' deaths will always be with them. So what didn't I like about this book? The first one I can say I didn't like is Ruthie. She's essentially the main character because most of the story follows her, but I didn't like her. She comes across as a little spoiled, high maintenance, and kind of out of touch. She's highly privileged in her upbringing, and she doesn't seem to notice. In fact, when she's confronted with it, she was kind of snooty about it. Overall, Ruthie just wasn't my favorite kind of character. The second thing I didn't like particularly about this one is that it is a little slow in some spots. It's not exactly an action-packed book, which is fine, but there are some spots where it's almost a little too slow. Specifically, I'm thinking of the trip to Atlanta that Ruthie took alone. It's a bit slow and detailed through the drive, which I didn't really find relevant. I was tempted to skip pages as she names the streets and where she's turning. It was almost like giving you a map of where she went so you could follow her. And since I didn't plan to follow her, I didn't get why we were doing it. Third thing I can say I didn't like about this one is the world events. Yes, the timeline was correct. Yes, I like when authors include world events in their stories to help set me in where we are in the story. But it seemed like an, let's call it, interesting choice to pick 2 big giant world events and put them in one story and have them happen to the same character. It almost seemed to be too convenient. I can't say more without spoilers. But let's just say that when the second one came up, when the first one came up, I was like, okay, I get why we're doing this. When the second one came up, I was like, really? Are we going here? So that bugged me a little. So what did I like about this one? This is a big one. This first one is a big one. The sisterhood is well described. These 2 sisters are the most important people to each other, and yet they drive each other crazy. They get along great sometimes. Other times they are irrationally angry at each other. It is the most realistic depiction of what it's like to grow up with a sister that I think I've ever read. Like, there were times when I went, yeah, I get it. Like, there were times when Ruthie was even trying to explain how she felt about her sister that I was like, honey, you don't have to explain, I get it. There's no rational reason for it. So that alone made this book worth reading, especially if you have a sister. Second thing I can say I liked about this one is that it is very emotional in a good way. It's pretty easy to see that that was the point of this book. It almost reads like poetry in that emotion is its entire point. making you feel something and connect with someone else who's felt that was the whole purpose of this book, and it does that. You're following Ruthie as she experiences loss and tragedy, and yet that sparks a whole new life for her. You feel her pain, you feel her confusion. The emotion in this book is the selling point for this book, for sure. Third thing I can say I liked about this book is I liked the ending. I like that this one ends peacefully, but it doesn't solve everything, because at the end of the day, it's a contemporary story and their lives aren't over. So they're going to continue to have issues and problems, but it's a peaceful ending. It's given them enough that you feel comfortable closing their book. And I think at the end of the day, this is a book about real life, and it's not going to get a happily ever after every time. And I think that's okay. There's no clear moment where Ruthie could have looked out at her life and gone, okay, my story's over. This is just this story that she's telling, and that it worked for this book. Who do I think should read this one? If you're a contemporary fan, specifically sisters, I think you'll love the realism of this pairing of girls. I also think if you're a reader who likes family stories and you like them to be emotional, and you like to feel those emotions, you're going to absolutely love this book. My rating, I gave this one 4 stars. It is exactly what I was looking for in an emotional contemporary story. I think fans are going to love this one. So 4 stars for A Soft Place to Land by Susan Rebecca White. Okay, that is it for me and the next 5 books that I read in June. As I said, I think that puts my total for June so far at 10 books, but the month's not over and I'm still reading, so we'll see. I don't know how many I'll get to before the month's over. Make sure to check out the wrap-up video when that shows up, because then you'll know the actual count of how many books I got to. Also, make sure you're following on Instagram, where I make sure to post cute graphics that show you exactly what books I read, and make sure you know what books are going to be on my official TBR for July. Drop a comment to let me know you're still here. Hit subscribe and tap that little bell so you know when I'm back. Keep plotting the path to your own dreams, and I will see you next time. Bye! Regular watchers of this channel will already know this, but I do book reviews every time I've read 5 books. You should know that I don't read just one specific age category or genre. I'm actually a reader of pretty much anything. So I will make sure to tell you what age category, what genre it is, and more importantly, what kind of readers I think will love the book that I'm reviewing. I do use a 5-star rating system to review all my books, so I'd like to take a quick second to tell you about that system. 5-star ratings are reserved for books that I absolutely love, that I think transcend genre. In other words, you might love this one even if you don't normally read the genre it's written in. 4-star books, on the other hand, are books that I absolutely love and think are great books, but they're more specific to the genre they are written for. 3-star ratings are for books that I think are good books, but they have a really niche audience. You might not love this one, even if you normally read this genre. 2-star ratings are the ratings I reserve for books that I think are problematic. I do try to explain some of the problems in the What I Didn't Love section so that you know if it's the kind of thing that would really bother you or not. 1-star rating, on the other hand, are reserved for books that I honestly didn't enjoy and can't recommend. They're just not for me.